Welcome to another edition of Turf Talk, Eclipse Award Season Edition. Vance, a topic near and dear to my heart. You and I have talked about this through the years. We are pretty much in Eclipse Award season. Not really too much that could happen between now and the end of the year to decide the awards, but did have some conversation today about Breeders' Cup Classic runner-up Effinex, perhaps bolstering his credentials with the Clark Handicap win. I don't see it.
I don't see it either. He had a nice win earlier this year in the Suburban Handicap when he upset Tonalist. Did run a very fine second to American Pharoah in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but honestly, to think a Clark Handicap can elevate him over Honor Code and even Liam's Map, I think is a little off-kilter as far as that's concerned. And I mentioned to you on Twitter, I don't think even a Clark Handicap win can elevate him to third place on my Eclipse Award ballot. I think that firmly belongs to Shared Belief, who had a unfortunately abbreviated season, but he could have been something remarkable if he had displayed his San Antonio and Santa Anita handicap form the rest of the year, but unfortunately he exited the Charlestown Classic with an injury, but better things to come from him next year.
Yeah, no doubt. Looking forward to that. And California Chrome will be back, so
yes.
We'll have the champions facing each other. Ironically, assuming it is Honor Code, or it could be Liam's Map, but if it is Honor Code, he would be the third champion from that generation. He's the one going off to stud. The other two are sticking around. Obviously, Shared Belief won't ever have that luxury, but nevertheless, just kind of funny how that works out. But I'm with you. I mean, second in the Classic's great. You win a lot of money. I have a real hard time, and this goes for anyone really, using second place as a credential to say, oh, look at the season they had. I mean, it's nice. I wish I could finish second in a bunch of races. But in terms of Eclipse Award, I'm all about the races you win.
Yeah, I think if it's coming down to a head-and-head battle between certain horses in a certain race, yeah, if a horse finishes second and your opponent finishes behind you, yeah, I'll take that into consideration. But, a Clark and a Suburban win, although nice, from a historical perspective, I don't think that's good enough to deserve this Older Male Dirt Award. And plus, another thing that I mentioned to you on Twitter, we brought up the example of Giopani back in 2009, finishing second to Zenyatta. That basically bolstered his candidacy for the Older Male Award that year, even though he had never run on dirt that year. It was basically a synthetic and mostly grass horse, and you and I, believe that this award was basically should have been restricted to dirt performers, but the majority of the electorate didn't see it that way. But,
and hasn't for a while, which is why this year, which it's not going to come into play, but
yeah.
there is the rule of main track and turf separated. Segueing into what my next point was going to be, overall, the handicap division just dismal resumes. I mean, Honor Code, yeah, it's great. You won the Wet Mile, you won a Grade 1 at Saratoga, third in the Classic. It was a fine season, but stacking up some, Macho again, Bulls Bay. I'm just trying to think of some of the horses I voted for through the years, since I don't like to vote turf male if I can help it. But it's just a far cry from some of the seasons we saw earlier this century and in the 90s.
Yeah, the older male division has definitely taken a step back in the last 5 to 7 years, no question. There's probably been a few other examples of horses putting out together good seasons in that time span, but yeah, generally Eclipse Award voters haven't had any qualms about going to grass horses for this.
No.
for the older male award as it used to be, which I just disagree with from a historical perspective. So, but hopefully, this will change perhaps as early as next year with California Chrome and Shared Belief, like you said. Hopefully they can last the entire season. I think that's been a problem in the last decade. These horses just aren't staying in training long enough to put together blockbuster resumes that will influence voters.
And to bring it back to the Clark, where Effinex could show up, we'll have maybe a preview of next season, because Dortmund and Keen Ice, 2 3-year-olds, looking to race there, and they'll be back next year. Also interesting, We only had the one big race where 3-year-olds faced elder. Dortmund and Keen Ice really didn't do anything in the Classic. Of course, American Pharoah won it. So to me, depending on what Dortmund and Keen Ice do, could give us a gauge of how they stack up against maybe that next tier of older horses. Obviously, Shared Belief and California Chrome are better than anyone in the Clark, I think.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how well those two do, and especially since all the major horses seem to be out in California these days. The presence of a Keen Ice and Frosted could certainly give the East Coast based older ranks a boost.
Yeah, and the West Coast, I don't try to do the bias talk too much, but I just think back. I mean, Game On Dude, I thought had some fantastic seasons. Never got rewarded because of the Classic duds. And then I think back to 05 and 06 when Lava Man was winning everything in sight. Unfortunately, those years had St. Liam and Invasor, who were slam dunks, and rightfully so, for the Eclipse Awards. But I just think of what Lava Man was doing then towers over what the accomplishments we've seen from the main track the last few years.
I'll politely disagree with that, considering a lot of that was on synthetic surfaces,
Well,
which I kind of had. I kind of
that's
had
fair.
a built-in bias against. Had to take that with a grain of salt. I don't think he always performed up to his very best on dirt surfaces.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine.
And I mean, he had no choice at the time being based out there.
Correct. That's
they all
correct.
were that way, but yeah, that's a fair point.
And another thing is with these 3-year-olds newly turning 4 next year, they're going to have to go out to Santa Anita at some point, or Del Mar next season, probably get their feet wet as far as running on California tracks, because the Breeders' Cup is there next year. That's going to play a huge role in determining who the champion is of 2016 will be. So, I would expect, a couple of them to at least go out for, say, the Gold Cup, maybe the Big Cap, or the Pacific Classic, or Awesome again. Obviously,
Sure.
I'm naming off all the major races out
One of
there.
those.
Yeah, one of those. If they can resist the temptation of going out to Dubai for the World Cup, which is a very tough thing to do, I think getting that experience over the Santa Anita Strip might be helpful for them in the long term.
Absolutely. Well, a lot to look forward to next year, and as much as we are looking forward to the Clark, always a great race, we're in agreement, no championship implications.
Sorry, Effinex.
Yeah. All right, well, that's it for this week. Turkey Week next week. I'm not sure we'll have our videographer here. We'll figure something out because we'll want to wish all of you happy holiday season. Until then, it's been Turf Talk.